Tonight's panel explores the growing backlash against equity, diversity, and inclusion, and asks how we can sustain justice in this work, in this moment. Together, we'll reflect on accountability, care, resistance, and the future of inclusive practices across policy, community, spaces, and activism. We would like to extend our heartfelt thanks to our sponsors and supporters who made this event possible: the Student Advancement Fund, SAF, the School of Community and Public Relations Student Association, SCPSA. Can we give them a hand, please? And the School of Community and Public Affairs, the SCPA. Can we give them a hand, please? And a big thank you to our professor, Dr. Sheftel, and the teaching assistant, Sky, for your support and guidance. Can we give them a hand, please? And your support is very meaningful, and we appreciate that. We'd also like to highlight the incredible work of Park Extension Curry Collective, who provided the food tonight. Founded in 2021 by community organizers Leorna Indira King, the Curry Collective began during the pandemic as a grassroots mutual aid initiative in Montreal's Park Extension neighborhood. The project brings together asylum seekers and recently arrived women, many of whom face barriers to formal employment, and hires them as the main chefs for the collective catering and the meal programs. Through cooking and sharing culturally meaningful meals, the Curry Collective creates both economic opportunity and community care, while also providing meals to families in the neighborhood who may be experiencing food insecurity. How are you guys enjoying the food today? All right. Thank you, Curry Collective. And we are grateful again to be able to share the food they prepared for us this evening. And we encourage you guys also to look them up and support them. Also, I'd like to acknowledge my partners, Anna. We give Anna a hand, please. Cicely, Leon, myself, Malik. And also, what did you guys think of the music, the playlist? Again, shout out to Cicely and Anna for a great playlist. Thank you. Now it is my pleasure to introduce our moderator, Kristen Young, a settler from Jamaica, and is currently the coordinator of the Black Community Engagement at Concordia University. She has lived and worked in Montreal for almost a decade. As a third culture kid with a deep interest in applying the principle of Sankofa to every day, Kristen uses her training and activism and her interest in collaboration, mental health, community care, community education, and the many hats she wears both professionally and personally. Please, can we give a hand to our moderator, La Soleil Unique, Kristen Young.
Thank you so much. Wow, thank you. The room is full. I'm so excited for tonight. This is gonna be really, really great. I'm gonna take a moment now to welcome our lovely panel here in no particular order, but they are actually in the order on the paper in front of me. So I'll start to my left with Independent Senator Marilou McPhedran, who is a Canadian lawyer, human rights advocate, senator, known for her decades-long commitment to gender justice, equity rights, social accountability. She has played a key role in advancing women's rights through constitutional litigation, international advocacy, and public policy work. As a senator, Marilou McPhedran has consistently championed equity-focused legislation and accountability within governance, bringing a care-centered and human rights approach to policy making. Round of applause, please. Thank you. Panel guest number 2. Oh, you told me how to say your last name, and I have paused now. It's okay. If I say it wrong, please correct me. Faiz Abhuani. Yes. Faiz Abhuani is the founder and director of the lovely space we're in tonight, Brique. Yes, a community-led nonprofit based in Montreal's Park Extension that works to build affordable housing, community space, social infrastructure that is rooted in collective care. He has over 20 years of experience in the community sector and real estate, working at the intersection of grassroots organizing, housing justice, and equitable urban development. Through his leadership, Brique focuses on decommodifying urban space. I'm going to start that sentence over. Through his leadership, Brique focuses on decommodifying urban space and nurturing inclusive, community-driven alternatives. Round of applause, please. And our last panelist tonight, Nelly Bassily, is a queer disability justice advocate, intersectional feminist, anti-racism and sexual rights activist, and media maker with over 15 years of experience in the nonprofit sector. Her work is shaped by commitments to decolonial, anti-racist, and feminist practice. In recognition of her contributions to equity and social justice, she was named one of Canada's top 25 women of influence. Bassily also engages in community media, intersectional feminist organizing, and public education on disability justice, bringing a powerful voice to conversations on inclusion, identity, and systemic change. Round of applause. And before we begin, I want to say a quick thank you to our students for bringing together this wonderful panel. Really, really excited for what we're going to do tonight, what we're going to hear, and the conversations that will spark. So, to get us started, how do you each understand the current backlash against equity, diversity, and inclusion? From where you sit, what feels most at stake? I'll say, I'll pick on you if no one feels right to get us started.
Pick away.
Well, you spoke, so I'm going to pick on you. What feels most at stake from where you're sitting?
Thanks very much, Kristen, and thank you for the invitation to be here with you. So I'm a lawmaker. That's our work. That's our primary job. We have a bicameral parliament, we have a House of Commons, and we have a Senate. And nothing becomes law in this country at the federal level unless exactly the same bill is adopted by both houses, which everyone in this room likely knows. For me, it's been a really rough year. It started out back to March 14th, the very first day of the Carney government announcing cabinet and completely excluding women and gender equality and youth. Nothing, absolutely nothing. It happened to be at exactly the same time as the Commission on the Status of Women was occurring at the UN in New York, as it does every year. This was actually the 70th year for the conference. It's unquestionably the largest annual women's rights conference in the world. And luckily, many of us were there. Many of us were working together. And when I say us, I mean Canadians. And so there was a mobilization within a few hours and a lot of organizations. I mean, it was a rolling sign-on. And so hundreds of organizations and individuals across Canada within 24 hours had signed a document that very firmly questioned this decision. For me, it brought me back to the Harper years, the Stephen Harper, a decade of Stephen Harper. And we've now had roughly a decade of Justin Trudeau, and we're about to begin, I have no idea how long, of Prime Minister Carney. But at the beginning, I'm unquestionably the oldest person in this room, but at the beginning of the Stephen Harper years, the very first grouping within Canadian society that was attacked by funding cuts, women's organizations. So, Indigenous peoples Indigenous women primarily have a saying, which is you cannot defeat a people until the hearts of its women are on the ground. And so this makes perfect sense that this would be the kind of strategy that we see feeding the backlash. I'll stop there because there's lots more that could be said, but for me that was the starting, that was the clarion call, if you will.
Thank you.
Do I pass this to Faiz?
Nelly, Faiz, what feels most at stake?
Sure. I prepared some notes because my brain can only retain so much information. But for me, the current backlash, it's not surprising. It's actually a predictable immune response to a system designed to protect itself, right? So what I think we're witnessing is the failure of EDI because it was never intended as a vehicle for liberation. And so EDI functions as a sort of technology of pacification. I think it's a way to co-opt the language of justice while sort of neutralizing its radical potential of liberation, which is what EDI has co-opted as a language of liberation. And so it manages dissent by turning structural demands into sort of HR metrics. Anyone who's worked in a big institution that has any EDI will have seen this. Diversity trainings and performative statements that really leave the underlying architecture of racial capitalism and colonialism untouched, right? We're talking about Indigenous women on this land who go missing and murdered every day, and it's a growing issue that literally no policy or government has addressed because they don't want to address it, I don't think. So what's most at stake, I think, is the possibility of true liberation itself. When we reduce justice to inclusion within oppressive systems, we legitimize those systems. So I want to draw on the wisdom of Palestinian feminist thinkers who over many, many decades have been telling us that feminist struggle has always been a pillar of Palestinian liberation, and globally, that feminism remains incomplete without the liberation of Palestinians. So I think that's where I want to center the conversation. What's at stake is existential. Like people's lives are at stake, right? So I think we're also seeing how easily institutional commitments to quote-unquote diversity vanish when confronted with, the genocide in Gaza. We've seen student movements being repressed on campuses. I can go on and on about this, but I will keep it at that for now. Even the extraction in Congo and how that's all connected. I think the backlash reveals that EDI is conditional. It exists only as long as it doesn't threaten power too much, and we don't want to talk about abdicating power and what that means. So I think what we should be protecting now is the ability to name those contradictions and to also recenter our work not on inclusion and all these beautiful buzzwords, but on the dismantling of the structures that make inclusion necessary in the first place and not liberation as the main stronghold.
Thank you. I am going to go to you now, Faye, as you bring a grassroots perspective, and so what's at stake for you?
Well, okay, so yes, so much there. The first thing I think about when confronted with this problem is that it's not a new, and it's part of a long story. It's true, and I fully agree that EDI, having been organizing for a while and talking about using words that are promoted in mainstream EDI 15 or 20 years ago, and feeling like we were revolutionaries. Seeing all this come out in the mainstream and being able to turn on the Netflix or whatever and see a character or see a show or something that features an issue that was non-existent, 20 years ago or whatever, or at least if it was underground. It was bittersweet. And it was bittersweet until, we saw Carney come in and we saw Trump 2 come in, where these, whatever sort of like dark, negative, cloudy feelings that I might have had about mainstreaming of revolutionary discourse ended up sort of being validated. But I also feel like because it's not a new story, it's part of a cycle, and it's important not to get bogged down by the backlash. It's important, I think, not to feel like, oh, well, it's over. Everything we fought for is gone. And what a waste it was. No, it's not a waste. It's an ongoing struggle. And it's, I think it's important to stay positive in light of all that. And to remember that the language that was co-opted was a language that was created. And we have to continue creating that language. We have to continue conversing and being creative and not holding on to those things that were stolen from us, because we were never meant to hoard these things. They were just meant as tools to organize and to build. And so that's I think what we're trying to do here at Brique by Brique. That's what the folks working on the inside are trying to do. I think that's what the critique and the radicals and the different organizers in our various communities of struggle are trying to do. So anyway, the question just made me feel like, whoa, let's not forget that we're working. Let's keep working. Let's not let this is not going to slow us down. So that's the feeling that I had.
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate the reframing. I think that the next question you have touched on a little bit, but if we can contextualize your experiences in your respective fields by talking about what are the real impacts you're seeing on marginalized communities, the impacts on policy, the impacts in community spaces, on housing, on activism. What are the real impacts to the challenges in your communities or in marginalized communities?
So I come from Manitoba, which is Treaty 1 territory, and it's also the homeland of the Red River Métis Nation. And it also has, as a city, as a capital city, a huge proportion of urban Indigenous people, the largest urban Indigenous population in North America, in an urban center. And it's what I'm already seeing, and I think inevitably we're going to see more of it. And that is encampments, huge food insecurity, and a protecting of what are already very privileged spaces. And I'm a member of that class, the very privileged class. And I take very, very seriously the gap that we're seeing that's growing. I think that the one possibility, and this picks up on a point that Faiz made, I think maybe the clarity of the situation now, that we have a party in power in government that it has a 48% approval rating in this country as of today, the results released today. And I don't go anywhere in this country, and I travel a lot when we're not sitting to a lot of different places when people invite me to come. And I don't see anywhere where people are saying, we need to change the federal government. It's exactly the opposite, actually, because for so many people, I don't think on this panel, but for so many people, a strong father-like figure who seems to know how the world of finance works and who is behaving in many ways as a grown-up when you compare the petulant child, who is the alternative for the country. That I think that clarity is actually going to increase more of the work that both of you have been talking about. I think the gap is so profound now and so clear now that a lot of folks in the middle, it's not going to take too long before the middle's not a comfortable place anymore, because actually the middle has disappeared. Economically, the middle has disappeared. So that's my hunch.
I mean, what's at stake for communities? I want to bring in first and foremost a bill that just passed, which is C-12, right? And the abhorrent anti-migrant backlash that is going to come from that. And the communities most affected will be migrants, migrant workers, people who are asylum seekers who would have had protections otherwise, but will suddenly see their lives upended. And I know personally people like who would be in those situations. And so for me, I think the backlash manifests as a violent reassertion of the status quo the moment liberation movements gain traction, right? So we see it in the silencing of voices that dare to connect local inequalities with global colonial projects, right? When activists name Palestine or Congo or Sudan as central to struggles for justice, they're met with accusations of being divisive or too political, or that's what's going on over there without making those connections, right? As if the ongoing genocides or extraction are not political acts themselves, right? So I think the impact is devastating because on the one hand, we know that, for example, Canadian companies are complicit in genocides and extraction, and therefore displacement of people. And then we see an anti-immigrant backlash here where, well, we're going to start deporting them. Well, deport them to where? And are we even looking at the root causes of why they were displaced in the first place? I think marginalized communities are forced into sort of a double bind, right? So either conform to sort of sanitized versions of diversity or being, the good immigrant or whatever a version of that there is that refuses to name their oppressors or be excluded entirely. And so, we see this, I'm going to come back to universities that claim to support equity while censoring pro-Palestine speech. In development sectors, we see the talk about empowerment while facilitating extraction of resources, of knowledge from communities, of resources that are beyond our imagination from communities, right? So, I think that I'm gonna end on this point because I can go on about this, but I think that if we start bringing in sort of deeper feminist knowledge that looks at the wealth of knowledge from global South feminists that also connect the political economy of things, then we start to actually get at the root causes of things.
Can I say a bit more about C-12?
Yes.
I could build on it.
Thank you for mentioning C-12. And let me just build on that a little bit because this happened in the Senate on Thursday night. And a number of us, I'd say maybe 10 of us, proposed a number of amendments. We coordinated our efforts. We got one amendment through, important because it was the amendment, unless it gets rejected at the House, which it may well. But it was proposed by one of our Black senators, Paulette Senior, and she pointed out that the bill, there's a long list of ways in which rights are undoubtedly going to be further infringed. But Senator Senior pointed out that the way the bill was framed, information about anyone in Canada gathered by the Government of Canada, the bill entitles them to share that information without limit with any foreign entity with which the Cabinet might want to share that information. And a number of us tried to remind our chamber about past times when Canada did exactly that, and we ended up with Canadians jailed. We still have the Diab case that's ongoing, where we've already got compelling examples of infringement of some very basic rights of Canadians. And now what C-12 has done is it's returned us to the time where the Cabinet, only the Cabinet, like just a few people, have the authority to repeat what happened with the Japanese Canadians: deportation, gathering land, putting them in camps. I mean, they may or may not do that, but they are giving themselves that power. Mm-hmm. And when you talked about the people you know directly affected, you didn't mention permanent residents, because C-12, we failed in trying to get this amended. So the Cabinet is going to have the authority for mass cancellation. Either people who are just applying, people who have already applied, people who are established asylum seekers, and permanent residents. Mm-hmm. Mass cancellation is the power that they've given themselves under C-12.
Thank you. I think you've contextualized this question in a way that I think is very important, because it goes beyond just like something that we do often in academic spaces, where we talk about something in a theoretical way, and you've given us a real life impact on multiple groups of people. And I'm wondering if we can, I'm going to go off script a little bit, I'm sorry. And I'm wondering if we can, because you've given us such a tangible example, and I know that all three of you work in a very tangible way, if we can sit here for a little bit and think about what are things that we can do, some solutions that we can think of. You raised C-12, you gave us a solution that we don't necessarily know yet what it will do, but your group met and said, this is a bad thing, and here is a way that we can combat it. And you spoke of other impacts on marginalized communities. We work in grassroots, and so I'm wondering if, to further your point of this is a cycle, it's something that we have experienced before, it's not new. I'm wondering if there are other examples of ways that we have seen EDI come in and we've gone, oh geez, and we've created an example or a solution that has made it not all-encompassing or take over our lives in a way that C-12 potentially would.
On the point of C-12, I think that because we know this is coming, the power to mass deport, to cancel permanent residency, asylum seeking, means that we need to rally around community, right? We need to, and many people have been and will continue to do that. And what that means is protecting our most marginalized folks and rallying around them. And what that means is going to be to, especially I think workers are going to have a huge impact on this, right? In public spaces where, if you're seeking healthcare, if you're seeking housing, if you're seeking any sort of supports that, to be the voice that's not going to want to snitch on your on your community members, right? And we're kind of going to see a version of ICE here, and so that kind of gathering around community is going to be really important. And if we're not thinking about it now already, we're already too late, I think. And people have been doing this in smaller ways in community, but I think also mutual aid and financial supports around people are going to be super important. And I don't see another way. Like we protect us. So yeah.
Faiz, I want to ask you specifically, because we're in a space that you thought of and that you have grown with community support. And so what do you see, or do you see, what do you see as the role of community spaces in solution building at this time?
Yeah, so this is such a sad thing. Makes me sad. But it's okay. Sadness is just a form of energy and it can be used in any way. So, okay, yes. The rejection rate is out of control. I mean, it was, in Park X, it was already very high. It's, the average rejection prior to this government was roughly 30% for all categories of migrants combined, and then higher for asylum seekers. It's nuts that people who need to be here or need to not be home because there's trouble that we're implicated in. But it's just unbelievable. It's very unfair. We all know this, and I really want to know why. I mean, I asked myself, been asking myself since college, like why? I just don't get it. But in any case, So now what we're seeing is the rejection rate is going even higher, and there's nothing that we as an organization can really do to counter that. I mean, I think it's important to accept it. Now, what can we do to mitigate it? What can we do to feel like we have the energy to keep going? What can we do to give people who are sent back the courage to keep fighting when they go home? Because we have to remember that when people are deported or when their cases are not going very well or they run out of resources, they still need to live. Even after they're gone from here, they still need to keep going. So it's important that for us to really convey to everybody who's here, very likely temporarily, that we care about them and we're thinking about them and we're here, even though we might not be able to support them and be there for them when they're back home or wherever the hell they're sent back to, because it's kind of random sometimes. That they know that they have people here, that they have friends, and they can stay connected, and that they can keep sending us news and stuff. It doesn't always happen, because the thing is when you get sent back, you don't necessarily get sent back to the right place, and you have to leave there anyway because you have to leave for whatever reason, so you go somewhere else. And so there's this constant movement. It's so similar, I mean, it's not the same thing at all, but it's similar to what happens in gentrifying neighborhoods and in communities that are in constant flux economically. I know that, I remember when I was 38, which was 6 years ago almost now, I was going through this whole mental thing, of why, and thinking back to the parents doing the whole thing about and then counting that I had moved 28 times in my 38 years. And that, it's just, you lose connection. So it's important not to also beat yourself up when you lose touch, to remember that you're going to be there in their hearts. So now the question is, practically speaking, how do you stay in people's hearts? And that is by, organizing. And in many different ways, we try to do this by just getting people involved in small business enterprises, kind of like very much inspired by the work of Leo with the Curry Collective. We have this alter mode event. I don't know if any of you have something to repair or you're kind of bored of, it fits well, but you don't like it, you can bring it in. And then we repair, we mend, we tailor, and we kind of like, make something more fashionable or nice. And it's like affordable, and then all the cash goes to, asylum seekers who have very little money to go on. And so there's the money aspect, but there's just like, these people all organized to support me. We just today, CTV was in to do a piece on this project because it's cute and everything. And the ladies who are here to kind of like perform a repair, it makes all the difference in the world because they're visible, they exist, they're present. So that's something that nobody can take away. Like somebody can take away your status, but they can never take away that this is, in a way, is now a part of your home. It's one of your homes in this world. And so when you organize against a deportation as a tenants' rights group or as a poverty alleviation group or as a radical activist group, or if you're organizing to just support people in making a little bit more cash, or if you're just bringing women together to talk about the issues and the problems that are specific to them, like in our connection group, which by the way was founded by Masoon, who recently passed away. On Saturday we're having the memorial. Oh, sorry, Alter Mode is not this Saturday, it's the following Saturday. Mm-hmm. This Saturday is the memorial, so obviously you're all welcome and everything. So anyway, there's a million different ways that we support migrants and asylum seekers and people, and it hits on a personal level too with the permanent residents because, I have a friend who's going through all kinds of stuff and he had to let go of the process, go back home and do his thing. And now he needs to come back. And it's like 10 times harder than just 10 years ago. It's, things have really changed. So I go back to trying to understand why. I just don't understand, and maybe part of the reason why I don't understand is because, but, I feel like, they talk about silos, and how I was talking about how this is not a new thing, this like weird struggle between people who want a better world and people who are scared of that better world or whatever, I don't even know. Yeah, sometimes I think that maybe I'm just not surrounded by the right people. I'm only surrounded by people that I feel like I can trust or that feel. Those are the right people. Of course, our people are always the right people, for sure. But I think that I think that when we have the energy, we really need to find common humanity with people who, hurt us, because at the end of the day, I don't see another way, but that's a whole other conversation.
Thank you. You spoke quite a bit about care in your answer, and actually you've all touched on it. The care that you give to yourself, the care that you give to your communities, how care shows up in your work. Which is actually a great segue because care anchors the course for this year, and it is part of the next question. So this panel frames care as a response to this backlash, a response to all of the things we've been discussing. And so what does care look like? You've hinted at it, you've just spoken about it, but if we were to frame care as a structural practice, as a political practice, not just an interpersonal practice, what does it look like in your work? And how can care sustain equity efforts under this pressure that we are in currently? Nelly, do you want to start us off? You're like scrolling through your notes there.
I was scrolling through my notes. I was like, am I editing something along the way? No, I mean, I think care in the context of liberation, if we're coming back to that higher framing of liberation, it's not a soft interpersonal gesture, really. It's like a militant political practice, and it's praxis. I think it's the refusal to let the system grind us down, which comes back to a little bit what you were saying, Faiz, of like, we've seen this before and we don't want to be completely defeated by the weight of everything that is happening. I think care is a labor of love for our community, love for the higher purpose of liberation, but then also caring for those that will be most impacted also means taking on labor that we would not otherwise take on. I think, often, especially in feminist spaces, we talk about reproductive labor as being kind of the care, where the care work happens, right? And so, many feminists before me have said this and will continue to say this after I'm no longer here, I think. I hope we get to a better place, but anyway, I'm hopeful, but not so much. I'm a little bit skeptical that what we call love, we really call unpaid work. And so, like, how do we value all of this unpaid work and this, reproductive and productive labor that is done by women mainly at the margins, and that we don't recognize. And so we need to bring that forward, I think, in the care of how much that kind of labor is important to and fuels our movements. If we think about, I'm a mom, and reproductive labor is part of my everyday, and no one's there to necessarily thank me for doing the dishes while my kid's running around, right? But I do it because I want to keep it to I do it because I care about the environment in which I'm bringing up my daughter. But I think those small acts are important, right? They're part of the larger ecosystem. And I went a little bit off script of my thing. I think care is resistance. It means building ecosystems that, as I said earlier, operate through mutual aid, that are outside of institutional logics. They have to be outside of institutional logics, and we're going to see more and more of how important that is. It means also, I think, creating spaces to grieve. We don't talk about how heavy, we talk about sort of surface level how heavy the world is, but I think it's important to give ourselves space to grieve, right? Whether we're grieving what we thought was international law and order on a larger scale, or whether we're grieving literally losing family and friends to colonial wars, all of that is important to hold, and to hold a space to grieve. I see so many people in work contexts, where they're like, oh, it's so heavy what's happening. Okay, next thing, that's the next thing on the agenda? No, that can't be the way we operate. We have to give ourselves time to grieve and care for that grief, I think. Yeah.
I've got it.
So I'm going to respond to the care question, but I'm also going to make a request, which is probably going to be really unpopular. But it comes from where I work and what I see and what I try to do. So I would reframe the question a little bit based on the vote last Thursday on C12. I sit across from the co-chair of the Pride Caucus for Parliament. And several of the amendments that we tried to make directly pertain to asylum seeking and to being in this country for people of the LGBTQ2S community. Directly related. We spoke to it. We mentioned it explicitly in our speeches about the amendments. And I watched him vote every single one of them down. And what I said was, in addition to, what I said in addition to that was, why don't you care? Why don't you care? And I've been thinking about this. You know, I've had a lot of plane rides since Thursday, and I've been thinking about this. And here's the request that's probably going to be really unpopular. I think one of the primary reasons that we lost those amendments so badly, not just in the Senate, they sailed through the House of Commons. We, as senators, listened to advocates from the community to come and talk to us about this bill. The House of Commons didn't have a single advocate when they were considering this bill. So many of us felt it came to us, we had to. And I just want you to know that the committee, and the Senate Standing Committee, is a pretty big deal in our little world, our little bubble, because the bill comes to a designated committee. That committee's job is to study the bill thoroughly, and the whole Senate entrusts that committee to come back and say, you know, we needed to amend it, it's okay the way it is, to explain in a very detailed report. Our committee rejected parts 5 to 9 of C12. Those sections dealing with immigration dropped inside a public safety bill so that it became very difficult to get at them. Our committee said, delete it all. That's very unusual for a Senate committee. And then the debate happens at third reading, and this is where the point I'm making, or the request I'm making. I think maybe the answer for why don't they care is because for too many parliamentarians, they come home, because they do come home. They have constituencies. They arrive, and almost never are the relationships there to make them care more, because they're insulated, essentially. Because, you know, we all have our own communities, our own families, etc., our own clubs in many cases. And I want to request, more than suggest, but request that in the strategies, I mean, C12's the horse is out of the barn, right? But this isn't the end of it. I mean, we're not only talking about C12, C4. C4, again, the strategy of dropping inside a pretty, you know, a bill that had some merit, but sticking inside there, now the complete loss of privacy for any Canadian who has any interaction with any political party in this country. All of that information is up for grabs. The parties can do anything they want with it. And that passed too. I mean, why wouldn't the political parties support it? Well, they shouldn't support it because it's wrong and it's a terrible invasion of privacy, but they did. And then C5, which has already been mentioned. You know, it nullified the Extinct Species Act. It nullified it. One act of Parliament wiping out a whole act. And the main projects office that's been set up, it's all extraction industry. And there are so many projects, big projects, particularly from Indigenous communities, that could be invested here. It's not like there's a lack, but there's a focus on the extraction industry. And what we're looking at, and it doesn't even need an act, is billions being transferred. Where are we going to get the billions that are going to the militarization of this country? Well, they're going to come from the communities we're talking about here. They're going to reduce access to education, health services, etc. So somehow, in the process of trying to survive this and reduce the easiness for parliamentarians to be so disconnected from people that these kinds of votes can happen.
Yeah, go ahead.
I thought
It's not surprising in a lot of ways what you're mentioning about this. You're sitting across, the member who represents like the Pride caucus. That unfortunately I've seen in a lot of ways where in queer communities that don't see the intersections of people's lives, like. They see their struggle as queer people, but then they don't see that there are migrant queers. They don't see that there are, Black folks who are queer, and that people don't just suddenly wake up and decide to, battle one oppression today, And so for me, it's also a kind of like what queer community are you surrounding yourself with if you don't see that migrant queer communities are going to be affected by this, and that you're voting against your own community or a portion of your community. So I would also want to have those conversations with this,
Point.
Yeah.
Have those conversations.
Yeah.
Have those conversations with your parliamentarians.
Especially because they have huge amounts of power, and this is that negatively affect many thousand people's lives. So,
Yeah, so just to the structural practice, the political practice. No, I think you're on theme. I just want to ground us, and before I ask you, Faiz. So our structural practice, our political practice is to bring slowness and care into our everyday, and then also to have conversations with folks in power so that we can ground the local thinking and ground our community in what they're doing at a very, I don't know how to emphasize this, but an up here level. I feel like we're on the same page with me, kind of. Yeah, okay. In their work, so they're not connected to the community, so we'll enforce the community in our conversations with them, I think is what I'm hearing.
Make them care.
Make them care. Faiz, do you have a structural political practice to reinforce this care?
Oh my God. Yeah. Well, okay, so on the care issue, I just wanted to, and it is implicit in what was already said, but I want to reinforce this particular thing that I've discovered and am so far from mastering, and that is take care of yourself. So yes, take care of each other. Take care of those who are most vulnerable, those who are most scared, and but take care of yourself. And I've noticed so many people from organizing over the years, and many people that I see now who want to do something, who see me as being old school or too slow or not doing something hard enough or whatever. I see a lot of those folks dropping out or not being able to really listen and making mistakes in organizing. Okay, I can name some that I am definitely responsible for. One, when you organize, you putting a lot of pressure on people around you to perform to a point where they're not able to take care of themselves and they burn out. Two, I have missed out on so many opportunities to build relationships with people because I dismiss them because they were too conservative or they had the wrong perspective, or they were on the wrong side, or they had power and they didn't give me what I wanted or my grant or whatever, and so I dismissed them. And if you're persistent like me, you will meet those people again. And you will be embarrassed.
Or punished.
Or punished, oftentimes. So I think it's really important to take care of yourself, because if you don't take care of yourself, you're not open. You don't see the opportunities. Your vision is super, super narrow, and all of your senses are narrow. Your mind is narrow. And at the end of the day, what that allows you to be, at best, is to be on the right side. But it doesn't really allow you to get anything done. And there's a lot to be done. There's so much to be done. I mean, do I have the energy to organize against the bill? I gotta ask myself that question. But if I had more space in my mind and in my heart, maybe I'd be able to do all this and also organize for against C12. And I think taking care of yourself opens up a discursive a possibility that is so inspiring when you think about it, because yes, we want to understand why someone who clearly understands what it feels like to be excluded, why that person, when they're in a position of power, would exclude somebody else. So you want to understand what they're against. But when you're really, 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 really taking care of yourself, and you're really, 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 really present, and it's really hard because there's so much stuff to do, and it's hard to take care of yourself without taking time off and doing the things that are important for your body and for your soul. But if you're able to do it, you can then start asking the question, what are they voting for? What are they, because they know they're making a compromise oftentimes, but for what? What do they see that we don't see? What do they think we're wrong about? What are they scared of? And if we're able to understand that, then we can talk less about what we are really scared of and talk about what they're scared of, and walk them past their fear so that they can eventually join us or come closer, or at least see what we're trying to do as really cool. And so I don't know. I don't know if any of this makes sense, but I just wanted to add that little piece of take care of yourself, because also life is short. There's all these problems, but again, it's cyclical.
Kristen, we just received hot food, so we'll not set hard time if people are fasting.
Okay. If anyone is fasting for iftar, you can have iftar now. We just got more hot food. Curry Collective just brought in more food. Please feel free to words. I'm so sorry. I'm going to start that all over. If anyone is fasting and would like to break their fast now, please feel free to do so. The food is now hot. That's much more English than whatever was happening before that. Okay, so we've got care in the everyday. Make sure that those in power understand the folks that they're actually working for, but also at the heart of everything, take care of yourself so that you don't burn out, so that you are able to actually work for the goals for your community, your people, whoever you're fighting with. And keep in mind that life is short. So take things seriously, but not too seriously at the same time. The way that we want to move now is to talk a bit about institutionalized EDI. So many of our efforts now, I think you had mentioned this a bit earlier, Faiz, that we are using a lot of words that aren't necessarily our words to talk about these efforts that we're making. And so some argue that this institutionalization of EDI has made it more vulnerable to backlash. Thinking particularly in Montreal, there's a Ville de Montréal EDI policy. It has 5 arms. They released it last year. It's supposed to be great, So what do you think are the limits of things like that? And then where do you see are the more transformational, transformative possibilities?
So first of all, I'll declare a bias on on institutionalizing and legalizing.
Yeah, that's fair.
And I just do want to remind everyone that we have in our charter, a Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms, which is entrenched within the supreme law of this land, Section 15 on equality rights, and Section 15.2 that specifically protects affirmative action. And this goes back, 1981 is when we were negotiating the wording of the charter. And it has not delivered anywhere close the degree of protection that many of us believe should have happened. But it's better to have it than not. I also have to declare, I think quotas are great. I really do. I think my work is quite international and was before I came into the Senate. And the places where you actually see a very definite shift in opportunities to those who have been systemically excluded, practically excluded, often those opportunities are created, and they are created because of quota. One could argue, and I suspect my colleagues might, that there should be nothing to do with the law, nothing to do, that it will be better without laws that address EDI. That doesn't resonate with me, but I'm a lawmaker. I mean, I have a particular lens. But I also, if I had time, there's a long list of systemic changes that have actually occurred because of EDI. And there are numbers that have changed. That we do have more diverse workplaces in Canada. Where I work in the Senate of Canada, it's a kind of EDI that happened in the last 10 years because there was a decision by Prime Minister Justin Trudeau to change the patronage system for the Senate. And after 150 years, anybody in Canada could apply, and the selection, the short list, has been made at the community level by small committees of community volunteers. And then those lists have gone to a national committee, also volunteers, and only then did the short list go to the Prime Minister. That's very different from deciding to put someone in the Senate because they raised a lot of money for your party. And we now have 53% of the Senate is female. And I don't happen to subscribe to that making an instant wonderful difference. I think I have seen many of my female colleagues very dedicated to perpetuating the patriarchal institution that we work in. But in addition to that, I have also seen a significant increase in the number of Indigenous senators we have, a significant increase in the number of Black senators we have, a significant increase in the number of Muslim senators that we have. And that can make a difference in terms of decision making. And that would not have happened without this de facto process that has been going on. And by the way, my prediction, it's done now. Prime Minister Carney's not going to do it this way. He's not going to be interested in an independent Senate, right? I mean, it was something that, this is my 10th year. I went in the first year of this process, and I think it's probably over in terms of the selection process.
Nelly, I'm assuming that you.
I'm sure someone wants some counterpoints here.
Thanks for a rich discussion.
Yeah. I mean, so sure. I'm not sure. under Trudeau, there was, a feminist foreign policy, and everyone was clapping about how feminist, and there's a lot of feminist washing and pink washing that happens in terms of having these, politicians, espouse all of the, EDI principles. But at the end of the day, I also have an issue with someone like Justin Trudeau being okay with, perpetuating a genocide and not speaking up about it, and that's continuing with Carney. So like that for me, like there's a disconnect between like kind of it's okay. I'm gonna speak in memes. It's like that meme with the bombs, and it's the bombs have like a queer flag on it, and it has like, oh, it was sent by a black woman, therefore it's like, no, the people who receive the bombs don't think it's still a bomb, so yeah, the limits, I'm gonna come back on script to my notes. I think the limits of institutional EDI is that I think it's designed to fail. I've been in institutions where after the horrific killing of George Floyd, we start to have all this money and influx that comes into EDI, but we're now seeing the sort of deflation of that too, right? So there's a paradox here. You can't institutionalize liberation within institutions that are essentially built on colonial and capitalist foundations. Let's be real, I was at an institution, a post-secondary institution where, when we start looking at the history of who founded the institution, well, it has colonial and capitalist history. So to ask that institution to then, fight for our liberation is sort of like, well, we have to look at the history of it. I think EDI becomes vulnerable to backlash precisely because I'm going to say it has no teeth. It's a set of recommendations. Once it is institutionalized, it's often a set of recommendations, not a restructuring of power. It becomes a tick list. I've seen it. I could go on and on about it, but I don't want to focus on the micro minutia of the institution. And so I think when push comes to shove, institutions will always choose profit. They'll choose extraction. They'll choose, geopolitical alignment over diversity that they claim to champion. McGill is a great example of that, unfortunately. All of the investments into Israeli companies and the complicity with that, with genocide is very clear, and that's why there was a backlash against students speaking up and making those connections. So I think we need to support those students that are making those connections, because no one else will. I think that transformative possibilities that are emerging they're emerging outside of institutions. I don't think that's a wild thing for me to say or for my position, at least on the issue. It's in spaces where people are building new paradigms and that are rooted in feminist and decolonial practice. I think the other piece for me is I also want to quote from scholars like Françoise Verge, who calls for a politics of cleaning the world of its colonial debris, feminist. I think feminist economic political analysis will really bring us forward. And when we look at land, what are reparations? What are solidarities that are possible? Beyond just what the institution wants us to play in as a sandbox. For me, the future is not to reform HR departments or to build another great department somewhere in an institution, but it's to build autonomous structures, of what we're saying, care, resource sharing, and political education. Yeah.
That's actually a great answer to the next question. So I'm going to read the question and then I'll throw it to you, Faiz. So looking ahead, what does a meaningful future for equity, diversity, and inclusion look like to you? So specifically thinking about like care, accountability, collective well-being. Are there things we need to let go of, things we need to protect or rebuild?
Oh, okay, my mind is still in the previous question, but I'm going to try to transition in my answer. Yeah, the question of institutions is a tough nut to crack, but I think that it's hard because I kind of agree with you both.
Somewhere in the middle.
Yeah, you're in the middle here.
The thing is like I agree with your analysis in terms of like what a joke. But at the same time, I also appreciate that institutions have their own culture, and the upper classes are not going to disappear overnight. And live and let live. You know, I definitely will not put any kind of energy towards, you know, supporting or anyway, I'm not going to focus on institutional EDI. We're going to focus on building. But at the same time, I do want my kid to go to MIT. You know what I'm saying? Not Concordia, no offense. No, it doesn't matter what he does, you know, and all that kind of stuff. I don't care. But I certainly am happy I went to McGill. You know what I'm saying? It's a joke. You know, it's a joke. So we just need to focus, which brings us to the question, right? To this question,
What are
right?
we
So
looking to
focus. Focus is the answer.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, here's a call, right? Let's remember. Let's go back so that we can go forward. Let's remember all of the great authors, activists, organizers, poets, musicians that inspired us to stand up and to feel that there's a connection between the struggle we have inside of us and the struggle that we see around us. Let's honor them by building a new language. Let's allow ourselves to enjoy the process. And like, look, Leo, you know, who founded the Curry Collective, she definitely, you know, was critical of the system, but she was not dogmatic in any way. She was like, okay, let's go get money from here, and then let's go pretend to be a sad immigrant there, and let's, you know, talk about women's empowerment here, and, you know, and then after 5 o'clock, let's dance. You know, let's get together, let's do what we have to do, and let's gossip, let's make some food, let's feed each other, and let's not, most importantly, let's not, how do you say, it's important to be critical. It's important to understand that our relationships, you know, within our communities are laden with power dynamics. But let's also remember to just forgive each other as we go, and to create a new culture, to continuously create a new culture, because through movement, it's the movement that's going to make it so that it's impossible to pin us down. Yeah, they'll take our words and then whatever, but we'll be way past that by the time it becomes institutionalized. So let's be way past it, is what I have to say about that.
Thank you. Senator? Nelly? Meaningful future, what are we building?
Thanks. So, AI.
We're building AI?
We are. We are building AI. We are building AI.
Got it.
And the almost impossible to avoid reality that's coming way too soon is unemployment on a scale that will have a tremendous impact on the tax base. And so even before that, we've got this shift in resources to militarization. Then we have the impact of AI. And I want to invite everybody to think really seriously about getting the Government of Canada to create a basic livable income in this country and entrenching it. A lot of what I'm hearing my colleagues on the panel talk about requires a basic degree of human security. And a lot of that is probably going to be taken away from a lot of people. So we have a bill in the Senate, Senator Kim Pate, amazing person, an activist, and young, which is great because she's going to be there for some considerable time. And it is exactly that, the bill. It has to get more support from more places. And I recognize that there are arguments from the labor perspective, there are arguments from the don't bother with any institutions perspective. We'll be fine on our own. We'll be fine on our own if we can have a basic level of human security. And profound unemployment is not going to give us that. So that would be my hope, that we would be thinking in terms of our population. We would be thinking of terms of adequate support for everybody. The 1%, the 10%, none of them need that. But look at the figures in terms of the inequality, the gap, the growing gap. I've convened a conference next month entitled The Virus of Inequality and how it has infected everything that affects our lives.
Thank you.
Okay. One sentence. And the question again is,
What is one practice, principle, or commitment that you believe is essential for sustaining equity work in this backlash era?
okay. It's like a spelling bee, you know?
Do you need me to count it down?
Have fun while staying connected to yourself, to others, to your ancestors, to your descendants, to the land. And comma and focus on your destiny. I like that word, and I'd like to bring it back. While remember that it can change. I think, just stay focused, stay happy. Be happy, okay? Please. We need a healthy, happy movement. All right? I'm begging you.
That was many sentences, but if
AI.
Invest in communities. Invest in any form of increasing access to justice that you practically can, and invest in holding those who hold power accountable.
okay, like
Wow.
wow.
I'm so sorry. This is totally out of line.
But very male.
But it's just Touche. It's just because you said invest. Brick by brick builds these kinds of spaces and affordable housing, and God knows what the future holds through all the means of our volunteers and staff, but also by issuing community bonds, which you can invest your money in, right? So www.playpublic.com, press the button, money goes out of your pocket into our pocket.
With a return on the investment.
With a return on the investment, that's right, Brett. You make money too, you know?
So with that closing word to invest in the space that we are having the panel in tonight, if we can have a round of applause to our panel.